Here we are,
It's Tuesday at 2:00.
and that means Minot Talk.
It's time once again. I'm
Every
ready for
Tuesday.
it. I'm excited.
You know what I'm excited about?
What is
I'm
it?
excited about the conversation we're going to have today, but I'm excited about Thursday. It's going to be a little bit interesting doing a debate.
Yeah,
Mike Blessum's going to be here. It's going to be interesting.
it's going to be a
Completely virtual.
exactly.
People can jump in, ask questions online. We'll get them asked as long as they're fitting.
They're relevant.
But it's going to be interesting because the candidates will not be in studio. They're going to be virtual as well. So it's going to be a little bit different environment there.
What time is it on Thursday again?
7 p.m.
7 p.m. It's
This
going to
Thursday.
be live here on the Dakotan Facebook, YouTube channel. All the
Absolutely.
fun stuff. I look forward to
Website.
watching it.
The whole shebang.
The whole
so
9 yards.
that's going to be a good time. Looking forward to that. We got our mics switched around.
Yeah.
So that way we got things out of our faces. The other mics were running through our faces. It was terrible.
Exactly.
Miranda,
Hi.
so good to have you here.
Yeah.
You're
good
just
to be here.
you're just listening to our random babblings.
I'm honestly thinking, during your live broadcast on Thursday, I'm going to be at a forum for candidates. Yeah. And so maybe I'll be looking at my phone, sending questions.
Do it. Or
I might.
if you have questions beforehand, send them in. We'll get them asked.
And speaking of that forum takes place on Thursday. It is at 7 p.m. as well, correct? Or is
I
it-
honestly think it's at 6.
It's at
I'd
6
have to look,
p.m.
but I think
Okay.
it's 6, but it'll probably go till 7:30.
And it's
I would
a
guess.
candidate forum for all of the candidates for Ward County Commission.
Correct. Put on by the chamber at City Hall.
Yeah. Okay. Fantastic. And
So this is a question you probably have no answer for because I'm asking the wrong person, but I'm going to ask anyways. It's at 6 p.m. All the other debates were at 4. Did you make that happen? Whereas later, where people actually could, well, in our opinion, where people could actually show up and do it because they don't have to take time off work.
Now you got me second guessing myself. Is it really 6? I'd have to
Okay.
look.
I can
I
pull
live
it
by
up.
a schedule, so
Yeah.
it's in my phone on my schedule. And I'll be honest, I'm jumping on a plane afterwards. So
Hey, that's awesome.
I'm honestly thinking
Going
more
to,
about
like,
that.
North Carolina, going to the flood, wanting to see it all.
No, somewhere
Guys,
a little more fun. Than
it's
that.
at 4 p.m.
It's at
Is it
4
at
It's
p.m.
at 4. It's at
Good thing you told me. I just showed up at 6.
It's
That would've been
it's from 4 to 6.
Okay, 4 to
So-
6
That's why
p.m.
6
So
was
then I
there.
will be able to tune in
Yeah, there you go.
Fantastic.
from
Perfect.
the airport, probably.
Yeah, that very good.
Waiting in the
Yeah.
terminal back there,
True,
getting
yeah.
ready to go.
Yeah.
Ask them questions. Very cool. That's going to be exciting. Anything big happened in Minot this past week, Kyler?
Last Friday, City Council had a special session. They
Yeah, that's-
convened for about a whole 10-15 minutes. They got together and they confirmed that they were going to hire a third-party outside source to investigate the whole police department situation with Chief of Police Klug and everything else going on there. So
Have you been tracking that at all, Miranda?
Yeah, I watched the meeting. I think that was a good move.
Mhm.
I think a third party brings in just a fresh set of eyes to kind of look at everything, all of the allegations that are coming up, and then make a good and solid
Independent.
suggestion.
Right.
And I sit on the Civil Service Commission too, so
Okay.
my understanding is this might come to us as well. So
So, like, I've always wanted to be in jury duty. Like, and if
have
it
you
was,
never served?
I've
jury
never
duty?
served
Really?
jury duty.
Okay.
Yeah. So if anybody that is the AI that generates the randomness of jury selections, yeah, listen, I want that. But are you like, you can't be wanting it to go before you, but do you
No.
enjoy from a technical aspect? Because I know that like it's a very weighty matter and it's going to affect the city, whatever happens, right? There's that. But from a technical aspect, is it kind of interesting being able to weed through some of that stuff, perhaps?
So, sitting on the Civil Service Commission, we've only actually sat on one thing that was brought to us, employee discrepancy of sorts.
Okay.
It's uncomfortable. I mean, you have to make really difficult decisions.
Right.
You hear, personal things, and I enjoy that kind of stuff.
Right.
I haven't sat on a jury either. I was not selected for the one time that I was picked, which was
Gotcha.
okay.
Yeah.
But I guess I kind of appreciate that kind of stuff. So, in the event we do, I guess we'll do the job that we have to do and
Right.
go from there.
Yeah.
So,
Definitely something big that's going to impact Minot, whatever happens. And with the amount of attention getting it, seems like there's going to be some type of fallout from it.
Yeah.
Um,
I think they expected a wrap up by November, it's like middle of November. I think City Manager Harold Stewart said was the latest to expect something to come from this. So it's up in the air. It's
be interesting.
it will, without a doubt.
Yeah. Anything else big?
I'm not in Minot really, but there's some big national stuff that's
Oh,
happened.
man,
I mean,
over the weekend, terrible.
well, just this morning, Iran
Yeah.
retaliated against Israel again and sent cruise missile.
We have
attacks
not
there.
talked
It was-
about anything with that conflict.
I know, but it just happened like 20
It's
minutes, like an
crazy.
hour ago.
There's a lot going on, and with like the pagers that
Yeah.
they used and all the intricacies.
Yeah,
that are
that's a
going on over
whole. We could have a whole episode about that. But
there. So Rob Fuller, he has a podcast that's going to be released today
today,
at 5 p.m.
Oh.
And part of the conversation was about pagers and the Middle East.
Oh, okay, fair.
And drones and war. So, and which is a whole interesting topic right there.
That sounds.
Do you ever think about that? So a point that was made recently by somebody was China typically, like, they have their conflicts, but typically they stay out of wars, right?
Mhm.
But you'll see them go and release these incredible just hummingbirds in the sky, which are powered by, and I use hummingbirds because that's the one I saw, but like different spectacles on the side powered by drones. And there's hundreds, if not thousands, of drones being used.
Yeah.
And the person was saying the reason why they do that is to show, yeah, we may not be involved, but we're definitely still, and we know it, but we're definitely still on the cutting edge of technology and apply that to war. Like, can you imagine a world of war where it's not going to be people at all? It's going to be drones.
I mean,
it's going to be AI factors. It's going to be all these different, like,
I think we're seeing it already.
yeah, you're right.
I mean, you've got Grand Forks Air Force Base, which is an unmanned Air Force base,
Yeah.
essentially. And as technology continues to increase and ramp up, we're just going to see it. We're seeing drones being used in the insurance world right now.
Sure.
Yeah.
It's gonna happen.
Scary.
Have you ever driven past Grand Forks at night at the right time?
Probably not.
Okay, fair.
Yeah.
If you do the
There's a
drone,
lot of factors right
the
there.
drones are all out at night, and
Okay.
it's just blinking dots all over the sky.
That's
It's kind of
crazy.
crazy. It is. It's a wild thing to see, without a doubt.
The new Northern
It's
Lights.
coming.
Yeah,
It's coming.
yeah. It's. I mean, in the Russia-Ukraine conflict, we're already seeing some of it.
Right.
too.
And that's
Mhm.
a lot of old technology being used in that war.
exactly.
Well, I mean, it might not be that old, but comparatively, it's old.
Yeah,
you
you
know?
have the two versions of it: '60s tanks versus new age drones, and it's scary what the possibilities could be.
The question will be, how will they infiltrate like the drone type warfare? Will it be done on a technological basis? Will they be hacking into computers to control those drones?
Yeah.
That's probably where it's going to get really
That's where the
interesting.
next level comes
Yeah.
into. Yeah,
If you want to help your country, be a hacker.
there you
Mhm.
go.
And
Or an anti-hacker.
yeah, whatever you need to call yourself to make yourself feel good about
And
it.
honestly, if you're not in the internet type age, or the bracket of like you focus solely on using the internet, you're probably like, what in the world are these people talking about?
Yeah, this is fair.
know?
That's true. But good news is we're not on radio.
This is true.
So people that are on the live
Hopefully, if you're
stream,
watching us, you have a semblance.
Facebook
of-
though, but like I say that as a joke, but a truth is like Facebook, the audience that you hit with Facebook is not the people that are messing with drones.
Not at all.
This is true.
I think you got to go to
to
TikTok.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yep.
TikTok.
TikTok Live.
And I
Yeah,
do not have. I have no TikTok.
I don't either,
yeah.
because then that's a whole nother discussion of TikTok in
I would
itself.
agree. That's why I don't have it.
Without a doubt.
So interesting stuff there. That's not why we're here to talk. What we're here to talk about today, though, we get to talk about insurance and property taxes. And go ahead. You're going to say something.
No, I was just going to say I'm excited to talk about property taxes with Miranda Schuler.
I'm excited to talk about numbers in general.
Exactly.
You just love numbers.
I do. I really do. Yeah.
When did that happen?
Oh, well, I mean, I've always been a math and science geek in high school and grade
Okay.
school. I mean, it's kind of just followed me my entire life. So, it's funny. I went to school originally for biology. I was going
Okay.
to actually be a doctor.
Yeah.
And then again, love of math and science. Life transitioned me in a different direction, and I ended up in the insurance world, which is, very numbers based.
Right.
So
Without a doubt.
it works good.
Mhm.
I like where I'm at.
But it feels like insurance is an interesting thing. You have some agents that just feel like they're a salesperson. And then
It's what you're passionate about. Honestly, I think that has to be it. I don't look at it from a perspective of, sales driven. I'm educating people on, the products that are available to them, what might be
Right.
relevant to their lifestyle or their needs and so forth. And, people may say, oh yeah, that's a canned response, but that's how I approach it.
that
It's different for every person.
It's only canned if you don't put it into action.
True.
exactly. Well said. Well said there, Kyler. Good
I
job.
try sometimes to do something from over here.
But with that said, I look at a lot of numbers and in front of me. You guys have your computer screens. I'm old school. I have paper with,
You got the whole
with an actual
You
pencil.
got the whole layout here.
It's a
ready
clicker
to go.
pencil, but yeah, yeah. But you know,
if it broke, if it wasn't, what'd you do?
I'd have to have a sharpener.
She would have a
Exactly.
knife.
So you're
She would
right.
definitely have a knife.
Well,
You'd be sharp.
I'd have
with
the
it.
little sharpener, but
Okay.
at home I have the one that mounts to the wall.
Oh,
Like,
yes,
those
you
are
do
the
got
good
one of
I'm
those.
much older
Those
than
are
you guys,
classics.
but like the 80s, you get up
Yeah.
and go sharpen your pencil up real good. You'd have
See-
like 3 of them on your desk.
Yeah, I grew up in an age where we definitely had electric pencil sharpeners.
Yeah.
But we
didn't
also
have
had the
those.
little ones that you carried around with you. But then when you found one of the crank ones, those
Yeah.
were
Yeah,
awesome.
the
Yeah.
electric ones were never as good.
No,
It wasn't even a
I
comparison.
don't even know if the electric ones were around when I was in school, guys.
Ah,
It was
yeah.
literally the ones.
I love it.
They were by the door, mounted on a like
Yep.
piece of wood or something.
So obviously there's this big hurricane that happened.
Yeah.
And some people are saying that it's worse than Hurricane Katrina.
It has the potential to be.
There's the whole political aspect of it and stuff. That's not what we want to talk about. And we're not going to talk about it in depth. But we went through a flood. We know what this is like. So from an insurance standpoint, what we were talking a little bit before show, but what does that have to be like for them going through stuff like that? You mentioned FEMA and how they help, or if you have flood insurance, then doesn't help the same and all that stuff.
So we went through a flood here, obviously, and it was right around the same time that there was major hurricanes happening as well.
That's right.
A lot
Your
of
standard-
natural disasters that year.
Your standard homeowners policies don't cover for water that comes into your home, and traditionally in your hurricanes, and thankfully I've never experienced one,
Mhm.
and I don't sell hurricane insurance because we don't have that kind of problem up here.
Yeah.
Nor do we really have
Thankfully.
earthquakes, thankfully, as
Yeah.
well. But when it comes to water inundating a property or flooding, you have to have a national flood insurance program or a FEMA program or some type of a flood insurance program to have coverage for those types of things. And, your coastal properties probably have more of those than we did up here. I think there was 1,400 active policies when we flooded in 2011. So you have to hope that more of those properties will have some coverage. But again, it's government insurance. So generally speaking, unless you've got a private market, the coverage is fairly limited.
Okay.
And the people who don't have any coverage will be relying solely on FEMA. And if anybody remembers from 2011, you had FEMA coming in and basically doing up to $30,000 for people. There was different assistance programs available, but you can't take insurance plus those. So
Right.
The other thing that's interesting is the flood insurance program is very financially underfunded. And the continuance of these types of natural disasters keep putting pressure on it from a federal level. They got to make some big changes.
Mhm.
What it's going to be, I'm not sure. I've done some lobbying in Washington, D.C. on that kind of stuff, but there's going to be some big changes coming that way.
So there's people obviously on the coast. They got their homes built on piers and in the middle of the water.
Mm-hmm.
That's got to be almost impossible to get in private insurance on.
So for flood insurance, there is a private market.
Right.
They can be choosy about what they take for insurance.
Yeah.
They can say, hey, we don't want this risk. It's too risky, or we'll take this because the risk is less. In those places where they won't take the risk, you have to rely on that flood
FEMA.
Insurance, the FEMA National Flood Insurance. And they do have a program for coastal. The
Okay.
coastal generally is a little more expensive, and there's
Right.
an option for home on post or piers.
Gotcha.
So,
Interesting. Yeah, it seems like it'd be very expensive.
I was just going to say, I can't imagine that could be a cheap option but
But to be
also-
fair, if you're buying, that's exactly where you're going. If you're going to buy home in the middle of the water, you are probably not. That's probably not your primary
you're
residence.
not even
Yeah.
well, you're not even thinking about the cost of insurance.
No.
And honestly, you're probably self-insuring because you don't have people who are financially struggling buying homes, usually on coastal areas that may be built on piers.
Mhm.
There may not even be a loan attached to it. So flood insurance is based off of the zoning. So if you're
Okay.
in a high risk zone, then there's a federal requirement if you
Mhm.
carry a mortgage.
Mhm.
So
I
there's a
see.
good chance those properties, if they don't have a mortgage,
They
they're
don't have
essentially
to.
self-insuring.
Yeah.
Right.
So
Makes sense.
I
Very
would-
good.
I would
Looks
guess that
good on
might
their
be-
taxes.
yeah, it might be a lot of self-insured people down there.
Very good. Very good.
What
You
about-
mentioned. Go ahead.
For some of the people that are affected more inland, where there were some of the dam failures that were affected from that, are they going to be? Is that the same kind of process for that? Is that is that
Yeah.
still caused technically by the natural disaster, or does that have a different?
Well, the natural disaster, it doesn't matter if it's a flood here or there. FEMA's going to look at them all the same.
Sure.
But from a flood mapping perspective, they're probably an X zone, which is your low to moderate risk, which is what we are right now. Good portion of mine, it will be transitioning into an A zone, which is a higher risk. But those inland properties that flooded, will likely be very similar to what happened here.
Sure.
And honestly, the majority of the floods that happen across the country happen in those X zones, which are your low to moderate risk zones.
Mhm.
And there's no federal requirement for insurance on those zones.
Gotcha.
Yeah.
I see. Interesting. So
Yeah.
that's where the majority of it happens, or is that the majority that was known? But you're looking at from a data standpoint. So
Data standpoint, so an A zone is your highest risk. So obviously, statistically speaking, that's where they're going to happen the most often. However, there are areas that are zoned X, kind of
Mhm.
like Minot, where the
Yep.
risk is actually higher than what they should be zoned. We were zoned X, but our risk was higher, obviously, and
Mhm.
we saw that happen in 2011.
Yeah.
We will be zoned into that A zone,
Mhm.
which AE to be exact, indicating there's a base flood elevation that'll be attached to our area, putting us into the high risk zone and the requirement for flood insurance, which isn't a bad thing. It really isn't a bad thing. It's just an extra expense if you're going to be living in those areas.
Sure.
So we jumped into a hurricane. We acted like a hurricane. I don't even know that we have a formal introduction
I don't
for
know.
Oh yeah,
Miranda.
probably not.
Probably
No.
not.
So you are an insurance expert. Tell us a little bit about what you do day to day, every day.
I do a lot of stuff.
Well, okay, yeah, sure.
A lot of stuff.
As a from 8 to 5,
Okay.
just probably still do a lot of
Generally
stuff, but
speaking.
generally speaking,
8 to 5. I own an insurance office here in town,
Sure.
and then I have one up in Botno as well. I'm from Botno originally, from the Turtle Mountains, in that area, so it made sense to put an office up there. And when my dad was ready to retire for many years, he ran nonprofits, the ski lodge and the golf course up there.
okay,
When he was ready to retire from that, I was like, "Hey, you want to work in my office?"
yeah,
And he owns an auction company, so he does all of our farm and ranch type policies and stuff.
Okay.
We run that out of that office. But here, it's just me. We run a very lean staff. Me and my one main producer who's been with me since I bought the business in 2017, and we could probably hire another person or two, but I run on a tight budget and look at numbers, and financially, until some of that debt from owning a business is paid off, I
Yeah.
run lean. So
right.
Fair
that's what I do.
Makes
I work
sense.
with clients all day long and assess risk and solve problems.
You were mentioning a little bit while we're jumping on, or not while we're jumping on, but beginning of our episode here, that insurance kind of found you. How did it find you?
That's a weird story.
Okay.
I mean, life takes you down different paths, right? I mean,
Yeah.
everybody's got their story, and mine is long and kind of boring. But essentially speaking, I'd been in the sales industry for a long time. I actually sold cars for quite a while, and I really enjoyed that.
Yeah.
But I wanted to be home more with my kids,
Mhm.
and my insurance agent called me one day and said, "Hey, would you be interested in working in the insurance business?" And I'm like, "Maybe. Let's talk." And it was a pretty big, substantial cut in pay, but it meant I got to have freedom and be home. So I made that jump, and I really liked the business. I liked the industry. I really enjoyed the relationship that you build with your clients specifically, and that I think in numbers. So I really get to do that every day. And I worked in that office for quite some time. Then I moved into another office, and then transitioned in to purchase that office. So it's kind of where I am now, but I really like what I do.
That's
Very
fair.
cool.
Yeah.
Very
And
cool.
For anyone, also, we got into this a little bit too. For anyone unfamiliar with your past, you formerly sat on Minot City Council,
Mhm.
and you're now currently running for Ward County Commissioner,
Yep. And I was on the school board too.
the school
Yep.
board as
Yep.
well. Yep.
Yep.
Right.
So
And there's other commissions that
I
you're
was
part
going
of.
to say,
Yeah.
if you,
So there's a big question that needs to be asked
here's
here.
the thing. Okay, this goes way. Well, you're gonna ask how I got into this, maybe.
Yeah,
But
yeah.
It goes way back. Like, so let's talk about like high school. The
Okay.
kid that's
Oh,
always
gosh.
like student council president and class president.
That was
and-
you.
Yeah, that was me.
I,
That was me.
I feel that.
Like
Yeah.
how hardcore did you go?
I mean, I really like that kind of.
But were you creating signs, vote for Miranda,
No,
and stuff like that?
I think I just kind of got pushed into those roles
Okay.
for the most part.
Because it was natural.
Yeah, and then as I got older, like I still found it really interesting, specifically on the city side. And I had worked managing bars. This was quite a long time ago.
Sure.
For Ione Metz, who is Chuck Barney's mother-in-law.
Okay.
And so Chuck kind of mentored me on stuff. And at that time, he was a city council member.
Right.
And I remember walking in one day, and he was working on stormwater management. And I'm like, "What are you doing? Like, is this what you do?" And he says, "Yeah." And I thought, this is really interesting.
Mhm.
And then fast forward to a few years later, I met Dave Lehner, and Dave Lehner and I started talking about some of this stuff. He was
Mhm.
previously on council. And I thought, I think I want to do this. I don't have a lot of money, so my way to give back to the community is to serve publicly. I like
Right.
doing it. I'm not trying to do a commercial. That's it.
I'll do it.
People ask me if I'm crazy because I do this kind of thing.
You
I
say
enjoy
yes,
it.
right?
No, yeah, probably. Some people are into like nursing.
Right.
I am not a warm and fuzzy caring type person. That sounds bad, but it's just not my personality.
No, it takes a certain kind of person.
Or
to do
like
those.
teaching. I don't have a lot of patience.
Mhm.
There's a different person for each type of job.
Yeah.
I like public service.
Well, what's interesting, the first time we met was at a store.
Mhm.
That's where we formally met. I did see you in person before, which isn't hard. It's mine up. But I was at the dentist's office.
Yep.
And it was right around the time that I was actually trying to get a different interview set up
Oh,
back in the day. I'm like, oh, there's Miranda Schuler, but it's 8 a.m. And like, I'm not like fully processing. So I was like, there's no sense in having a
did I see
conversation.
you at the dentist?
No, you didn't see me.
Okay.
Because you were just walking in.
I think I pointed you out when you checked out with me.
Probably. Yeah.
Yeah.
So, yeah. So interesting. And now I lost my train of thought, but I got it back.
There
So
you go.
my point is you are analytical. We're seeing that.
Mhm.
You enjoy that. But it seems like everything that you did, selling cars, whatever, it centers around people though.
Yeah.
You enjoy people too.
No, I'm an introvert.
You are okay.
I am an introvert. Yeah. In fact, I actually really, really appreciate my alone time. People kind of tend to exhaust me, which sounds terrible, but if you're around people all day, like I need to completely shut down. Like on the
Yeah.
weekends, you'll find me all by myself with my dogs in the hills. Like this, I went hiking the last 2 weekends. I just like to get away from people. But I have to push myself outside that comfort
Yeah.
zone because I think I'd become a
Interesting.
hermit. Now I do work retail, so
Yeah.
like
You
don't
have
find
to
me.
have to work with.
See,
people
that's
at
what's
that
interesting.
point.
Every job you get revolves around people. And with that,
Yeah.
you could literally be in a basement at a bank providing analysis and stats and stuff like that, being a credit analyst, being
Yeah, could be.
there's very high places you can go in those type of deals, but still somehow your
I
career
still
always
get putting it, and it's funny. So the retail place, I have a part-time job. Like,
Yeah.
I literally, I don't like to just sit around.
Yep.
I can't do it. It's not in my wheelhouse. So, I took a part-time job at a retail store. So every place in Minot is looking for employees.
oh yeah,
Yeah.
One day I was shopping in the store and, I knew that they were short on staff because it was very evident when I was in there. And, I'd say maybe a month or two later, I thought, I could do this. I could work in this store. And so I went to the manager and I'm like, hey, you got time for me to work here from like 5 to 8:39? And she's like, are you kidding? And I'm like, no,
should
No.
be, but I'm not.
no, I'm like 3-4 nights a week. So and it's funny because people will come in and they're like, what are you doing
Yeah.
here?
That's
I'm
hilarious.
working $13 an
Yeah.
hour job.
Right, yeah.
Just
Living the good life.
It's,
Yeah.
Yep, that's awesome.
Keeps you
I love it.
occupied at
keeps
night.
me off my
yeah.
recliner.
There you
Yeah.
go. Yeah, that's fair though. A
Yeah.
little side change in your pocket. You
Yeah.
got to do something at night.
Actually, it just goes to income taxes.
There we go. We've
Look
tied
at
it back.
this,
Or,
look at
yeah,
this.
listening.
Trying back into taxes.
Wrapped
Yep,
it
that's
all
right.
around.
As a
Yeah.
business owner, I pay a lot in income tax.
Yeah, you
So-
do. Yeah, you do.
Yeah.
So, all right, that's one of the those. But let's give insurance its due justice. Okay.
Sure.
So, you've been since 2017. So maybe you're the reason why all of our rates go up. Because
I've owned since 2010. I've
sorry.
been in the industry since 2007.
my bad.
So you
So
got over
been in
15 years in.
So
Yeah.
when you started owning, you were like, all right, we're raising rates, folks.
Yeah, I wish it was that easy, but it's not. No,
Yeah.
actually, I don't wish that.
Yeah.
So, every state has their own elected insurance commissioner's office.
Yeah.
And so that office actually regulates all of the carriers and the producers. That's what we're called essentially. So if a carrier needs to file for an insurance rate increase in the state, they actually file it through the state insurance commissioner's office. That office analyzes the data on, is this a needed change for this company? Do they need to increase this for the consumers based on the loss experience? Most times you'll see those increases approved because they can validate it.
Okay.
In some states, like for instance, California, they'll just rubber stamp no. Well, then the insurance carrier has to essentially pull out of the market completely, making it very difficult for people to get insurance, or they have to limit their exposure. So all of a sudden they're cutting and canceling policies. In North Dakota, I think our insurance commissioner's office does a really good job. So I'm not responsible for the increase, but I would tell you the increases are due in part to inflation overall, which nobody wants to hear that, but it's true.
Mhm.
the COVID 2020 shutdown
Mhm.
had a big play in it. So, for instance, like on the car insurance market, people say, well, why is my car insurance going up? For a long period of time, many of those facilities making different parts were shut down. So all of a sudden you got kind of a shortage on some of those parts. And if you talk to anybody who does body shop work,
Yep.
they'll
Yep.
tell you parts have gone up. Availability is a lot harder.
Mhm.
So what you end up seeing now is like you can have a minor accident and your car will get totaled because the cost to replace it or fix it is actually more than what it would cost for them to total it out and sell it as parts.
Nice.
So-
That's a good hack.
It's crazy. Like I had a client, they owned their car for 6 months. They got into a small fender bender in town. Somebody ran a stop sign, hit them,
Yeah.
and didn't have enough insurance to fix it. So we ended up taking care of it for him, but didn't even deploy the airbags. And it ended
Wow.
up being a $41,000 total loss.
Wow.
Yeah,
Jeez.
5,000
Incredible.
miles on
That's
that car.
incredible.
5,000
And so
miles.
people are like, why is insurance going up? Because stuff like that is happening.
Yeah.
And then on the home side, North Dakota is strong on the wind and hail market. Thankfully, in this area, we haven't seen big wind and hailstorms. That's
Right.
evident by a lot of the old T-lock shingles that are around from the 90s.
Okay.
But Bismarck has had a lot.
Yep.
And it's hard because we have a low population. Insurance is all risk-based sharing in a
Mhm.
group. So we have a low population. So we have a little bit higher rates on that, and specifically
Interesting.
driven by wind and hail. And a lot of carriers don't really want to do business here because of that. So
Okay.
you're
Sure,
seeing that
okay.
increase as well. From a national market, all of the insurance companies buy what's called reinsurance to be able to cover these large scale losses that are
Right.
happening. And that reinsurance market from like Lloyd's of London and Zurich, that's seen about a 50% increase, which
Wow.
ultimately gets passed on.
Of course.
So, yeah.
So, and this is interesting that I didn't know. This isn't necessarily directly tied to what the insurance we're talking about, but so like Aaron Rodgers, right?
Mhm.
One game into a season last year, he gets an injury,
Mhm.
and teams can buy insurance on the contracts that they place with. And you mentioned Lloyd's of London. That's one of the places that does that. That's why it triggered.
Sure.
So they go and they sign a $200 million contract. They go and get a $50 million insurance policy on it, which costs a couple $1 million,
Mhm.
but it insures against the injury of that player. So that way some of those contracts can actually make sense. I never knew that.
Yeah.
Insurance is like gambling. It's like gambling at a different level. Essentially, you're buying an insurance policy to basically protect you if something bad happens. The insurance company is determining the amount of risk you have and assigning a premium to that.
Yeah.
Now, when you talk about those big things, there's absolutely, I mean, you can insure anything you want to. Like, for instance,
Interesting.
like the Hustfest that just
Yeah.
ended.
Yep.
Right.
You can buy event insurance if something
Okay.
happens, or
COVID
the
happens.
state fair. You can buy those types of policies. The question is it financially feasible for you
Right.
as a group to buy a policy on this in the event that it doesn't occur?
Mhm.
That's where the big key
Yeah.
comes into play.
So you said it's like gambling. Some people say like it's a huge Ponzi scheme.
Well,
What do you say to those people?
I think it's more like gambling.
Okay.
I
Sounds
mean,
good.
and it depends on how much risk you want to take. It's
Yeah.
really like the policy you build is based on the amount of risk tolerance that you personally have. Carry a lower deductible, it means you probably have a lower risk tolerance. Carry a higher deductible, you have a higher risk tolerance. So, and you have to lower premium in return for that.
So we already kind of talked about a little bit with the hurricane that happened on the East Coast. Does any of that fall back to us in Minot when you see all the policies that are going to go out? Obviously, a lot of it's going to be federal, but
Well, it's a lot of that's going to be flood, but some of the larger stuff, like maybe the wind damage, that's going to impact that reinsurance market, which
Okay.
just continues to get hit. You look at the fires in Hawaii.
Yep.
Sure.
That impacts the reinsurance market.
interesting.
So, it doesn't matter what carrier you have. And I write for several different carriers.
Right.
We're not considered a fully captive company, so I can write through many different carriers. They're all seeing increases across the board for the most part. The interesting thing is when the companies log those increases. So for instance, one company may have taken their increase and logged it last July. And then all of a sudden everybody's like, oh my God, my rates went way up. I'm going to start shopping. Well, fast forward 1 year and, you're seeing all these other companies filing it. And my phone's kind of ringing off the hook right now.
Sure.
Because, that's
but it's
what's happening.
anti-productive because there's just a ton of shopping
For
going
the
on.
consumer, it's difficult too, because now it's getting more challenging to find a policy to place them in.
Yep.
And from, an agent standpoint, people always think we're making all this money. They
Oh,
come in
yeah.
and they're like, here's my $1,000. Now you
Look
can
at
go on
that.
vacation. Well,
Right.
the reality is I'm making anywhere between 3 and 11% on that.
Whoopee.
And that's as a business, right? So
Yep.
you got to take all the expenses off, my payroll and all of those other things on top
Yeah.
of it. It's not a lot. It takes a lot to make it work.
Right.
Well, the carriers themselves have been increasing premiums for the consumers, but they've also cut the premium or the commission levels for us as agents.
Of course.
So, it's kind of a double-edged sword. So the
Yeah.
customer comes in, they're like, you're making all this money. Well, actually, I took a pay cut, but okay.
Yeah. Right.
It is what it is.
So,
You just
so
have
what
to
other
deal with
careers are you looking at? No, I'm kidding.
Honestly, I was talking to Ryan Ackerman not too long ago, and I was like, if I didn't get into insurance, I probably would have gotten into engineering.
Yeah.
And he's like, well, you still can. I'm like, you want to buy an insurance agency?
Right.
It's never too late, right?
I like
I like it.
engineering too.
Yeah. Very cool. That is extremely technical.
Yeah.
If anybody has questions, feel free to drop them. All right. So another big issue. Well, first off, we're going to move to property taxes, but where's your office located at?
It's in town here. It's between Cancer Care and McDonald's.
Okay.
Given
Yep.
mine at
General,
terms.
yes.
Yeah. That's
I
right.
look out at those pretty leaves behind the Wesley trucks. That's what I get to see every day.
I love it. Okay, fair.
Yeah. So that's where I'm inside the Affinity First Credit Union.
Okay.
So,
Yeah. Know where that's
I
at.
love it.
Yeah.
Right
Very
off
cool.
Broadway there.
Yeah. Right
Yep.
on Broadway.
Yep.
Been there for a long time.
So property taxes, huge topic of discussion right now.
Yep.
We're doing a debate on Thursday. We're not the first ones. There's been a ton of debates. It's
There
probably
has.
beat into the ground for the amount of debates that's been
It's
done in North Dakota on it.
surprising.
But it also shows you're not having that on Measure 5 about marijuana.
No.
Shows you how big of an issue this is to North Dakota. And it's a big issue to you, Miranda, because you surprised me. We run into each other and you're like, yeah, so I know how much you pay in property tax.
Yeah. Well, okay. So I'm kind of a sleuth as well.
Yes.
Everything's public record.
It is.
So
and it's perfectly
Yeah.
fine.
honestly,
North
if you
Dakota,
want to,
it's-
if you want to go on and you can see my property, taxes,
Exactly,
You can
right.
find Jonathan's.
Well,
you can
you-
find everybody's.
You can, and you can search by name, and then so I was gonna
You
say,
can't search by name anymore. They took that away.
okay, gotcha.
You have to gotta do a little more digging.
They make it a little
Okay.
harder.
It's a
now,
little
yeah.
harder than it used to be, but
But I have definitely used Google Maps,
Mhm.
well, Street View,
Mhm.
and went through like city councils and said, oh, this is where they live. Good
Yep.
to know. Or your representative, because all that information's out there.
Yep.
This is where you know. This is where you live. So yeah, I'm about it. There's
I-
nothing wrong with it.
there isn't. And honestly, more people
Should
should do a little more digging. It's funny. I hear everybody, and I'm going to use finger air quotations. I've done my research,
Yeah. What
and
does
I'm
that
like,
mean?
what does that mean? Like,
Wikipedia.
yeah. Or I went on, Facebook and saw something.
Yeah.
I love it when they're like, yeah, I saw it on Facebook. I'm like, okay, what did you actually see, and was it actually true?
Why not?
you know?
Whiners and complainers is not
True.
research.
And I am not the Miranda from Wine. And I know
oh, that's
her,
right. Yep.
But I can't tell you how often people are like, oh, you do the whiners and complainers. No, that's not me.
Not every
Not me.
Miranda in Minot is that Miranda.
Yeah, I'm not that one. I do know her, but I'm not her.
Yeah,
So,
absolutely.
Yeah.
So, all right, property tax. Obviously, city council has done a good job of, well, maybe I shouldn't say they've done a good job. That'd be a different discussion, but they have made an effort to reduce property taxes in Minot this year. Of course, that could be a bad thing if Measure 4 passed because then rates get locked in, and then that's as much as we'd get from the state going forward at a 2024 level. That's what some people would say. I don't know if it's true. But talking about Measure 4, first off, gut reaction. Do you like it or no?
okay, so I am not a reactionary person. So,
Okay.
there's people who are like, yeah, let's do it. Let's legalize marijuana. Let's cut property taxes. Let's do it all.
Fair.
I am not the
You're an
reactionary
analytical person.
Oh, I am very analytical. And I'll be honest with you, if you ask me today how I'm going to vote on that, it's really hard for me to say what I'm going to do.
Yeah, me too.
Because
Yeah.
from a personal standpoint, shoot, I'd love to have $4,000 back in my pocket.
Right.
However, from a analytical standpoint, I look at the numbers and I'm thinking, all right, $3.2 billion per biennium the state's going to pay. No real clear mechanism. And there's not a lot of trust in, unfortunately, the people who serve on the legislature because they didn't pass the 4 last bills.
Right.
And even the proponents for Measure 4 will say that, there's been a failure at the legislative level. So now we're going to put the trust in them to figure out some of the mechanisms to make this work. And then, you've got, like, for instance, and I've got numbers because of
Yeah,
course
that's
you do.
good.
Got them right there.
From the city budget, you talked about how they reduced. So even when I was on the city, the initial property tax
Right.
bill that or estimate is literally an estimate, worst case scenario. So
Yeah.
I think the city of Minot levied 28 million
Yep.
in property tax
initially.
and then it's down to 24 after the first reading.
Yep.
But I don't think people expect it to drop by 4 million.
But I don't think that's uncommon.
Yeah.
Even when I served in those positions, they get the first one and then people are like, oh my gosh, this is a lot. It always goes backward because
Yeah.
it cannot go above 28.
Right.
So
It can't
that
go
is
up.
normal. Even on the county commission budget, you'll see a cut. I
Mhm.
think they levied 23.8 million. It will be lower than
It
that.
felt like on the city one that city manager, and I like Harold Stewart, went and tried to build in a place for them to be able to cut with the salaries.
They're not. That's what they do. I
Yeah.
think
Mhm.
they make it as lean as they possibly can, but they know that there's going to be cuts that
Right.
happen.
They have to anticipate that going
And
in.
the challenge is you're looking at this budget and you're like, okay, where am I going to cut? Am I going to cut in the
Yeah.
police budget? Well, you've got, a strong police department that's got some morale issues that
Mhm.
has had some turnover in the last several years. That's a whole other thing. But cutting from that budget could impact the morale of the existing employees.
Yep.
And traditionally, people don't want money cut from public works or public safety for that matter. Okay, we can cut from the roadside because it's not sexy, right?
Yeah,
And the
right.
roads aren't going to complain.
Yep.
Yep.
But the
But
people,
long-term
people will.
deferment of that maintenance
Then you-
basically just makes it more expensive in
That's
the
a
long term.
phrase I hate.
Well, it's
It's
true.
not.
It's true.
It's
No,
so
it's true.
Like, honestly, if you're looking at the city budget, and I ran for mayor, but that would have been something that I would have said is we need to put more money into the infrastructure, the critical infrastructure.
and it's shown because in the public survey from
Yeah.
last fall, that was
Oh,
one of the
we
biggest-
definitely need to put
It's-
more money there.
It's always
Exactly.
been a
Yeah.
big key thing. And I think for like the public, this is really in depth when you're talking about, all of these numbers. I mean, you got a whole binder full of numbers, right? It's kind of overwhelming for a
Mhm.
lot of people. In fact,
Yeah.
it even is for me when I'm reading. I'm like, what the heck am I looking at here?
Yeah, it takes even if you know what you're looking at, there's so many numbers side by
Mhm.
side, it can get jumbled without a doubt.
But it's easy to say, I just want my snow removed from my damn streets. Pardon
Mhm.
my French.
Oh, yeah.
Hopefully, not getting in trouble.
You're
But
fine.
I want to make sure that when I call 911, the police are at my house to help me.
Yep.
Or if my house is on fire, we want a fast response time to have that,
Right.
fire
Yeah.
put out or my
Yeah.
family saved.
There's things that we want for sure.
Yeah. So, when it comes to, measure 4, I am very cautious. And I'm concerned because I actually I've done as much research as I can. I went to David Hogue had put on
Yep.
something talking about if it passes, the effects of where we may see things. And I know we're going to be seeing potentially some increases in some additional fees, because even Rick Becker has talked about, when you have him on your show, the political subs, it doesn't take the power away, but it does make them able to or find a different taxing mechanism or
Right.
increase fees, which impacts those of us living here.
Yep.
My biggest problem, hands down, is the benefits to the large corporations,
Right.
specifically the ones with shareholders. Now, you might say, well, XYZ business is mom and pop business and they should benefit from it. Sure.
They
There's
should.
some big problems with the valuation basis and unrealized gains in our current property taxes. But again, with my paper,
Oh, yeah.
if we look at this, and this is what's so interesting because it's completely public information.
Yep.
Any person can go on the GIS page and pull this.
It's a nice thing about the state of North Dakota. It's very
Yeah.
easily accessible.
So let's just take Dakota Square Mall, for instance. Okay. So we know, all of us living here in town, if property taxes are eliminated or the way that they're currently looked at, and if the political subdivisions have to increase taxes or fees, who's going to pay that? Will it be the corporate conglomerate Dakota Square Mall out of Chattanooga, Tennessee, and their shareholders, or will it be those of us staying here?
Right.
I don't like this part of it. I wish they would have not included that. Because, for instance, Dakota Square Mall in 2023 paid $986,751.74 in
It's almost
property
$1
tax.
million.
That's more than I make in a year.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So, and they're not asking for property tax relief.
Right. They're
And
not.
people say, well, they'll reduce their rent. My
Yeah.
understanding is their rent is actually based off of your sales. Okay.
Okay.
So, or like this was an
So they'll
interesting
probably
one.
make more money theoretically, right? Because
Potentially, yeah.
the idea is that sales would go up.
Or you've got Suso 3 Southgate, which is the company that owns where Costco, or not Costco,
Cashwise?
Cashwise, sorry. And
That whole strip mall
that strip
kind of
mall,
there.
right? They're a company based out of Toronto, Ontario.
Oh,
Interesting.
Canada. And they paid $280,000 in property tax last year. So I have a real problem with them getting the benefit of
Mhm.
those of us living here. Now, from my job, I have several insured clients who are property investors. So this is the other part that really bothers me because I have these conversations. I got to put my insurance person hat on and talk to my investor in Las Vegas or in Colorado who has never set foot in our state. And I have a lot of pride in our state. Never set foot here, doesn't really care so much about what happens here. But the phone call I had at a renewal for one of them, he has 13 investment properties. They kind of move properties, these guys do. And he says to me, he says, "Hey, I hear you guys are going to be eliminating property taxes." And I said, "Well, it's on the ballot. It's an initiated measure. It'll be on the ballot in November." And he says, "Oh, okay." I said, "Question for you." And part of my review of his insurance is he sends me a spreadsheet of what he's making for rent because I need to cover loss of rents on his policies.
Yeah.
And he's using a management company. And I can also see what he's making per month on those properties because he wants to make sure he's properly covered. And I would say, I don't know if I'd use the word slumlord, but the properties are not in very good condition. In fact, one today is boarded up,
Oh, well.
fair. So
in bad shape.
less than stellar.
Yeah. So
condition.
anyway, I asked him, I said, "So you're going to reduce rents then if each of your properties," because he has a line for property tax. And he says, "Oh, no. He said, "We're actually looking at buying more property in North Dakota right now in preparation for," he said, "your Sentinel missile
Right.
infrastructure that you've got coming. And in the event that this passes." Now, you've got a lot of out-of-state investors that property in North Dakota is relatively inexpensive. Like, for instance, I was telling you previously, I buy a property, flip it, and things like that. I bought a property up in Botano for $32,000 that needed a lot of work, did the work myself, turned it into an investment property for a few years, and then recently sold it. You can buy a house in Minot right now for $99,000. I found it yesterday online.
Mm-hmm.
Just needs some work.
Actually, it's a functioning rental right now. You can
Sure.
probably rent it as it is. $99,000 to an investor in places like
Right.
Las Vegas or Colorado or
That's a
wherever.
Pittance to them.
It is like us paying $5,000 for a property.
Yeah.
And they will buy property here all day long. That is what worries me more than anything.
Right.
I would like property tax relief for those of us that live here
Mhm.
because we're the ones that are paying the sales tax. We're the ones that are paying the fees when, like if you look at the fee schedule for the proposed city of Minot, the garbage collection fee is proposed to go up.
Yeah,
There's
right.
going to be a proposed flood protection fee as well. Your
The things
conglomerates
like-
aren't paying that
No,
stuff.
it's things like that where you're seeing those effects that are really
Yeah.
going to hit the citizens of Minot, or at least that's the theory behind people,
Exactly.
the proponents against it. And when you look at that, that's where a lot of those questions start to be raised of the unknowns that come if that gets passed. Is what increases could happen to us on the unknown side.
And the other side, and I'm following both sides of this pretty closely. And you keep seeing, and you'll see it on social media, they're lying. I'm not lying. I'm just an average person.
Right.
I'm doing what I think is healthy and due diligence and saying, this is one side, this is another side.
Mhm.
What side is best for me personally and the people that I care about? Do I know what it is yet? No, but I am very concerned about some of this other stuff.
Right.
So a speculative take here might be a little far reaching. So excuse me, Jonathan, here, but so this could this potentially have, so with the Sentinel program that's coming up, there's
Mhm.
expansion that's going to be expected around the city.
Yep.
The city already potentially has a less than fantastic first time or starter home residence
Yep.
issue. Could this possibly, and if this were to pass, would this possibly incentivize more apartments and condos being built around rather than any potential for new homes being built?
I mean,
or would it not make a difference?
I don't know that it would make a huge difference because the people who are building your apartments, essentially, those are larger investment groups. I mean, it's possible that they're going to come in, but the other side of that is people don't realize cities don't build streets. They don't do the infrastructure.
No,
The
of
developers
course,
have to.
Right.
So if you've got a developer coming in to develop a plot of property to put in an apartment complex, they're also going to potentially have the increased costs of, paving, the storm sewer, the lighting, the sidewalks, all of those things that go along with it.
Mhm.
It could happen. I do think that if you talk to any realtor, they'll tell you we're short on inventory right now.
Yep.
And when you've got, potential influx of a large amount of people coming in to implement this upgrade, we're probably going to be short on housing,
Mhm.
which will drive the market up. Also, if you have investors coming in, drives the market up.
Right.
which leads to the valuation issues that we've got. Because if you're valuing a property, for instance, my house, purchased it in 2006 for $134,000, it's all public record. Anybody can find it. My property tax valuation in 2024 is $277,000.
Sure.
So I have not sold my property. I had to rebuild it after a flood. But I have talked to a realtor. They would list it probably in that 320 range. But I'm going to be paying property tax on those unrealized gains. I haven't sold my house, so I haven't been able to put that money in my pocket. I would have liked potentially a complete property tax abolishment for primary residents, which, we have the primary tax credit that you can apply
Right.
for, that I applied for and I received. There's a mechanism to determine that. Or if maybe potentially you freeze the property tax on the price that you pay for the property.
Sure.
And then you're not paying property tax on that unrealized gains.
Sure.
But I'm not sitting in those seats and I haven't drafted a bill. I'm just an average citizen.
Is property tax in general archaic the way that it's done? Because the school board is going to go and have property tax, right? That's a given. Okay, so my parents who have no kids never went to public school. They get to pay for that. Is that a little bit of an archaic system? How some of those fees divvy out?
I think the schools are a little bit different because I think the state should be funding the schools 100%.
Yeah.
Now,
Sure.
there is something to be said for a strong school system in the value that it brings to a community and the impact it has on the valuations of your property. But again, the valuation doesn't matter if you're not selling your house. So I would say from a school standpoint, that should be, and it really should be funded 100% by the state. The problem with that is each individual school district determines what they want and what curriculum they're going to have and those types of things. And, how do you create continuity between the different communities, which, is hard. Like, for instance, in Minot, our school does not have a building fund. The voters have not approved a building fund. So, other places when large infrastructure things come in or large improvements need to be made or repairs for that matter, they can rely on a building fund that exists.
Yep.
Minot doesn't have that.
Right.
So, and you can't use sales tax for schools.
Sure. Which
That's
is
probably a good
part of
thing.
the reason of why we now see the school board running in a deficit.
They've been running in a deficit forever.
for years now.
Yep.
That's okay.
And I mean, we had to approve deficit budgets. We had very conservative financial managers that were very careful, but 85% of our budget was the staff.
Sure.
So, and you really run a delicate balancing game when you're trying to figure that stuff out. And a lot of that isn't necessarily the school board or even the city council or the county commissions. It falls back on your city managers, your superintendents, the department heads that make those budgets. They're the ones that basically craft a lot of this. So
you said that one of the things you're not a fan of on this property measure 4 is the fact that legislature has not gotten anything done to this point. This is going to require the legislature to do something. What are they going to do? How's that going to work? So say that you are a no on measure 4. How will there be a property tax reform then? How would you see that happening?
I don't know. So the problem is when you serve in an elected position, it doesn't matter what it is. There are going to be people who think like you, and there are going to be people who think
Right.
the
Differently.
completely opposite of you.
Yeah.
And that's the same for the constituents that you serve. So to say, hey, we're going to do this, great. But there's going to be people in the legislature who do not think that that is a priority. And then people who do think it's a priority. So really, I think it's going to come from somewhere in the middle. The challenge is, where's it going to be? And it's completely an unknown. Now, with regards to previous measures, no measure is written perfectly. It's always going to upset somebody. Same thing with, things you have to vote on. You're always going to upset someone by the way that you have to vote, because we're all individual people, right? So I just don't know. I don't know what's going to happen. And that's where my biggest concern is. And I'll be honest with you, I hope that most people are like me. I think if you're dead set one way or another, you're probably not taking into consideration the concerns of the other side completely. If you're like, hey, it's going to have to be this, if, I won't listen to you if you don't think the same way I do. We need to look at each other, because I think that's where you find that the best answer is when you're utilizing all of the information.
Without a doubt.
Absolutely. Okay. So, and you're not sure if you're for or against yet.
I'll be honest. Like I said, I can't tell you exactly how I'm going to vote, but I am leaning more in the no side
Yeah.
at this point.
Still have to see some of the upcoming debates on it. See what
Maybe.
both sides
I
still
am
have to put
still-
forward.
I am still watching them all.
Fantastic.
So
It's
Yeah, I have to give my answer next week
Oh.
because that's what I told somebody.
isn't
I
that
told
hard though? Like it's so personal. It's kind of
It
like,
is.
telling somebody like how much you make or something.
Right.
It feels
Yeah.
like a personal thing. Like, I'll put political signs in my yard for, the people I feel passionate about. But when somebody asks me about something that I'm not super passionate about, I'm like,
it's a little
it's kind
different.
of personal,
Right.
like that's a personal question.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
No, you're right.
Gut feeling generally. Do you think it's going to pass as of right now?
I think it will. And I think it's because people are financially strained. And I think that will be the reactionary response. Now, the challenge will be, is it going to put as much money back into people's pockets as they think it is? I don't think it's going to.
Sure.
I mean,
I think
homeowners
over,
win.
I think over time, you're probably going to see some increases in some fees
Okay. Yep.
as well.
Sorry, and I'm interrupting you, but that's
Yeah,
one of the questions I wrote down. Like, are we going to see? Because that's what they always talk about is the state has done stuff, but whenever the state does stuff, the cities go and backfill what the state did with more taxes and fees.
Well,
I
so
don't know if that's true, but
recently I was listening to a debate between Bob Harms and Rick Becker, and Rick had said it doesn't take away local control. The locals will still have the ability to find another way to, tax or
Yeah.
to increase fees. The other thing that's interesting is special assessed properties. That special assessments, I believe, will still stay in place, and bonded debt. So for
Okay,
instance, the
right.
school board, we just had that bond pass.
Yep.
Okay.
So you think you're going to go to zero on the school? You're not, because we still
Okay.
have bonded debt to pay
Right.
back. I know the park board had bonded, and I don't know if they're fully paid off, but they bonded after the 2011 flood to rebuild. If there's bonded debt there, that may still exist. So it's not like it goes to zero. And so the other thing, so for running for Ward County Commission, I've the largest portion of this budget comes from the jail and the sheriff's department. So, I meet with the different departments to kind of get an idea on where things are. I was at Public Works, I think last week. But I was talking with Paul, the head of the jail,
Mhm.
and we were talking about budgeting, and I'd asked him, and this kind of plays into property tax as well, but I'd asked him, I said, hey, when you're looking at your budget, where's your biggest challenges? And so all these departments create their budgets 6 months before they actually go live. So they make their budget starting in June, they get approved in like October, and they go into effect in January.
Yep.
Well, that he had put in his meal budget, and I believe, if I'm not misquoting, I think it was about a 15% increase that the company that provides meals to the inmates took an increase on their costs in March. Well, food is going up. We all know that's
Yep.
happening.
right.
So all of a sudden now his budget is 15% backwards. So
Yeah.
now coming into this year's budget, he's got to make up that 15%. I said, you're going to need to ask for another 10 on top, just in
Just
case.
to make up for
Right.
this coming in.
So that's
125%.
potentially 25. I think he said he was going to shoot around that 20%.
Gotcha.
And we were talking about it a little bit, but that's an inflationary pressure that we're all feeling. And when people talk about like the city, the school, the county, or the state, they talk about them as this innate other object, when really it's us.
You.
We're
Yep.
the bosses. As the voters and the taxpayers, we are the boss of the people in city council.
Without a doubt.
We are the boss of the people that serve in the legislature.
Right.
And it's our money. So it's not the state's money sitting in a coffer. It's our money.
Now, it's our money, and the
They're
people
determining how to use it, though.
right, and people feel like the legacy fund is like, I feel like that gets treated differently than the standard budget because of the how the revenue is created, and people are feeling like it's time to use it now. I believe the person that created it came on our show, said we should wait until there's interest that can just pay all bills, and then that's when we should start using it.
Well, I don't think you can constitutionally use it. I don't know, because the legacy fund is different, but there are set uses for those funds. And I
Yep.
know some of the earnings are already being used to offset different things,
Right.
And to be used for things like Hub City funding and whatnot.
Right.
But
Because it's
I
like general
don't-
fund or something that it can be used for.
I would like to see, it would be great if that fund was creating enough income to be able to support, our kids' kids in
Yeah,
the
right.
future.
Without a doubt.
I mean, I'd love to use it now, but do we need it right at this moment? I'm not sure if we do.
are you in the group that says that if we start using it now, we're going to run out of it sooner than what we realize?
I think we will.
Yeah.
I think we probably will. So I think we're relying too heavily on the oil and gas industry,
Right.
because those players can decide to move at any given time if they choose to. And we keep seeing things evolve. I mean, oil and gas has been around for forever and ever, and it seems to be a fairly stable stream of income for us.
Mhm.
But who would have thought in 2020 we'd be shutting our doors for almost a year?
But
That's
yeah,
true.
nobody
Crazy,
anticipated
crazy
that.
stuff happens. Could something like that happen in that industry? Maybe. And then all of a sudden we're left trying to figure out how we're going to make the difference up.
Mhm.
And it's probably not going to be tourism because,
Lo and behold,
you know.
well, half the year
Yeah.
was shut down pretty
Well,
much.
Yeah.
We'll have a presidential library. So
Yeah,
Yeah.
that's
You
coming
never know what
soon.
happened then.
Yeah, that'll be fun.
I think you guys talked about Las Vegas and taxes down there.
yeah.
They sustain themselves off of people like me who go there.
Yeah. Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly.
So
But-
we just got to start building casinos in Minot. Is that it?
Honestly, the old Trinity building would make it.
Yeah, there we go.
Yeah. Yeah.
You've actually thought about this then.
We could make it a destination.
We could.
Why not?
Yeah, there we
Yeah.
go.
Honestly, I don't know if it'd go over well though.
Of course not.
However,
Interesting.
nobody would have thought that a bunch of casinos in the desert would go over well either.
Now we
Yeah,
got
that's
I
fair.
know,
booming
Yeah, and
exactly.
then
towns
it's
in
Las
America.
Vegas.
Exactly.
Yeah. So then that would bring you to the question of the liquor license. We definitely need to get a few
Oh.
more of those, and that's a whole other issue right now.
Yeah.
Oh,
They
it
have
is,
a-
yeah.
they have work
That's,
going on.
that's been an issue for many years.
Oh, yeah.
Too. Yeah.
Yeah.
that one's been
I
around for a
believe
while.
it.
Feels like something's going to actually come of it in the next few months.
Do you think so?
I don't know. I don't know if it will or not.
Or is it just going to end up getting shut down?
It was a contentious issue even back when I was on
Sure.
council, and it's come around a couple times since then. I don't know what's going to happen because you got to make whole the people who are sitting on those existing licenses, and the only way to make them whole is to pay them,
Mhm.
and that would be from our money again.
See, I don't know. People don't agree with me on this. Well, not every people do agree with me on this, but a lot of the people that I've talked to on here do not agree with me on this. And I don't know that making whole means paying $150,000 to them.
Well, I don't know that it does either, but that's what I think they feel like
Yeah.
should happen. Now,
But that's only because the city's involved. Because if they go buy an investment somewhere
Mhm.
and then the market changes, they're like, oh, bummer. That turned out to be a bad investment.
true.
But because it's with the city and because
The
whatever,
city's
they-
And
forcing
they
it's
have a-
regulated.
Yeah.
right,
Yeah.
they feel like they can, and I understand it. I'm again not dead set in my opinion, but I lean more towards I don't know that there needs to be that much of a like I get like one idea is like, all right, so we put the price $75,000 for a fee in Minot. So it doesn't dilute it
It's just
completely.
flat.
And then have a specific purpose that money goes, that is not just going to a reserve somewhere, but that it would actually help the city of Minot, whatever, and have something agreeable like that.
Mhm.
And that's a very beginning stage idea, but it seems like there would be an option other than saying, all right, here, we'll write checks back.
Paying everyone out just a flat fee.
The problem is it's I don't want to call it, but it's kind of like the syntax,
Sure.
like I think that we're going to see similar things happen if Measure 5 passes.
Sure.
Oh
There's going to be some type of regulation that has to be put into place because, you can't just have free willy hot shops everywhere.
You
And-
think-
It's one of those things when things pass, there's just it's the unknowns, the things we don't know that are going to come of it. You look at the possibilities we see with that, of all the extra regulations that could come out of it, whether you go back to even when the medical stuff first passed and how long it took just for the state legislature to get that figured out before it could become implemented. There's just such a wide array of unknowns that come with passing some of these things.
and things continue to evolve. So like,
Mhm.
you're talking about alcohol, which is essentially a drug. People get addicted to it.
Yeah.
Yep.
Marijuana is probably the same thing. It's not my thing.
Right.
But you have to look too, like things that are happening within our community. When I was on council, the first methadone clinic wanted to come to town and people
Sure.
lost their mind. Like they were so worried and they weren't understanding what methadone was and they didn't think addiction was a problem here, specifically with the opioids. It's a huge problem. And today I think we have 4
Yep.
methadone or Suboxone or replacement type clinics.
Yep.
Yep.
In fact, there's one in this building from what it looked like.
Oh, yeah.
And, those facilities provide a service to people who are, trying to find their way out of addiction, to be able to curb the side effects of, not getting the drugs. So when you're talking about any type of drug, whether it be alcohol, you got to look at it from, that addiction standpoint too. And
Yep.
you're seeing it, like I said, with the opioids coming in into our market area too.
So measure 4, you kind of feel like it might pass. And all right. And I want to jump back to that one more thing on measure 4, and then I'm going to ask you if you think measure 5 is going to pass.
Mhm.
Measure 4 though, so it does pass. Okay, say it does.
Mhm.
Well, this is a constitutional amendment. This is a big deal. In my mind, it's a big deal. Do you think it's a big deal?
It's a huge deal. And we have measure 2 that's coming up as well.
It
And
could
if
tighten
measure
it.
2 passes, then it's going to make it very, 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 very difficult to make changes or to, repeal anything that happens on measure 4. So I really feel like we may end up with some unintended consequences. Now, people will say you can't say if this passes, then this.
Mhm.
But I think measure 2 is going to pass as well. Just
You
like
think it will?
I think it will. Yeah, I do.
Interesting. Why? Why do you think measure 2 will pass?
I think measure 2 will pass because how do I say this without sounding? I think a lot of people are not necessarily the most informed they can be on the way
Yep.
the initiated measure process works.
Right.
Same thing with, for instance, term limits. I think
Yep, I was gonna bring that up
term
too.
limits passed not because people were concerned about their legislators here in North Dakota. So many of them thought that meant term limits on the federal
national
level,
yeah.
But
which makes sense,
term
but
limits,
it didn't.
term limits was so weird though,
Mhm.
and I agree with you 100% on that. But what did it pass? Like 60-70%. It was very
it
high,
was-
right?
Almost a
And
landslide effect.
How?
Yeah.
What was the percentage that Hovind got?
About the same percentage.
And there was a
It-
third
I
independent
know.
on the ballot,
Yeah.
right? It should not have worked that way.
I just, like I said, I think sometimes people interpret and maybe don't necessarily understand what they mean. And okay, what is the measure for age limits? That should be on the ballot.
That passed in June. That passed in the
Okay, the age limits passed.
Yeah.
in the primary election. Yeah.
So,
which is
yeah,
another
okay.
weird one.
That was another that one didn't make sense to me either.
And we're living in a conservative state. And I was asking somebody about this. Like, we live in a conservative state, and the conservative ideals say less government, and yet we're saying we are going to handcuff ourselves
Mhm.
on how we can vote.
Mhm.
Like, that makes sense.
So traditionally speaking, I tend to lean more on the libertarian side, which is kind of a bad
Mhm.
word sometimes,
Yeah.
with regards to government involvement in things. I think less is more. I
Live
really,
and
I really
let
do.
live.
I do. I believe in, and like with measure 5, I don't think it'll pass, but I think it should pass.
Okay.
Even though it's not something that I partake in, and
Yep.
I'm not just saying that. I really can't stand the smell of it.
Right.
But I think it would be. I think it should pass, in my
Okay.
opinion.
Yeah. So yeah. And so were you a fan of term limits and stuff like that?
No,
No.
so
Yeah.
I was not a
it
fan of term limits
restricts.
because it restricts,
Okay.
Yeah.
and because we have a hard enough time
Yeah.
finding people to run and serve in these
This is
positions
true.
because it's difficult. Like, you're looking at, leaving your business or your family potentially for several months, and we only serve once every 2 years.
That's the thing
You know,
too. It's such a limited kind of.
It's not for everybody.
The
No.
only way it works, I guess I can't say that because we're going to find out how it works as is. But it seems like the way for term limits to work best is if we go to full-time legislatures.
Mhm.
So you serve for a full 8 years. You're full time.
How do you do that when you're volunteering and leaving, your work?
Yeah.
It just
Especially
doesn't
in a
work.
state like
but
North
what I'm
Dakota.
saying is, like,
You're going to end up with full-time politicians.
exactly right. It's not necessarily a
That's
breakdown,
almost
but
what it
it's
seems
the
like it's on
Yeah.
the track for.
but with like, you're going to get people kicked out just when they're getting comfortable, and like you said, needing people to run. Like, they are going to have to step away from the business for 4 months. The only way it works is if they're getting paid a full-time salary, which still isn't going to be $120K or whatever that some people can make pretty easily in North
Mhm.
Dakota if you go and get into the right industry, right? It's going to be $60K or whatever, not great money.
Yeah.
It's the only way that it feels like it would work, because people are not going, just going to be a lot of empty seats.
And I think 8 to 12 years from now, we'll start to see what effects it'll actually
Oh,
have.
we're going to start seeing, yeah, for sure. But we'll start seeing it next cycle for sure.
Yeah.
I think so too.
2
And
years,
and
yeah.
there's a learning curve. When you get elected to any position, there's a learning curve to learning,
Yeah.
the nuances of the entity that, you can do as much research as you want.
There's
but
only
once
so
you-
much observation.
Once you
can
immerse
do.
yourself, you learn from a different perspective. And that's kind of why I like serving in these, because honestly, I'm a perpetual learner. So you just learn these things when you get into it. So you got this learning curve. You're only meeting, once every other year, essentially. And you've got very powerful committees that you get appointed to, and you are going to lose some of that institutional
Yep.
knowledge, because even at the city level, we keep seeing the same things come up over and over and over again.
Yep.
and it just takes looking back 6 to 8 years to find out, hey, we already talked about this.
Yeah.
And, this was what was found at that time when we built an ad hoc committee to talk about it. But sometimes those things just kind of get overlooked.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah. Interesting for sure. I guess we're a little bit past 3, so we'll wrap up here soon.
well, that was
But
fun though.
yeah, it's been,
time flies when you're having fun.
Yeah.
it's been fun for sure. There's so much to talk about there with the term limits and all the stuff that's going to go down
Before
there.
we do go, how about this? Are you in favor of term limits generally, or just against how the state specifically implemented it with the restrictions?
I believe the voters should
be
be
the ones that
ultimate
decide?
ones
Okay.
for determine, and
Which
not
is
that they
fair.
should, not that they should vote for, hey, do you want term limits or not? They should determine if they don't want somebody in office.
Sure.
If they don't want you there, vote for someone else.
But it wasn't even the state that determined that. There may be some legislative action that's taken on that in this next session, but term limits was put in place with an 8-year term or 8-year limit, not term, 8-year limit. And that was just out of the box too restrictive. It should have been 12.
I agree.
And a problem that I have, like measure 2, I don't want that to pass. Okay. I don't want it to be more restrictive for people to try to get constitutional amendments put through. But let me clarify, because the property tax one, whether I'm for or against that, I appreciate how it was done from the standpoint that it was grassroots. It was North Dakota that said, hey, that got the signatures that got on the ballot.
The people, the citizens went out, they got the signatures.
wasn't-
That,
it wasn't-
that's awesome. Like
yeah.
that's the way it should happen.
Yeah.
It wasn't term limits where you have outside funding to go and help pay for people to do this and stuff like that. If there's North Dakotans that want to pay for it and want to see it on the ballot, great. Let's see it on the ballot. But I'm not interested in being a target state for outside influences to come and say, hey, this is a way we can get a ball rolling nationally, because they have easy. And so if there was an amendment that needs to be done, it should be, and I don't know that it would be possible for it to be done. But if you find out that you're an outside interest, that, yeah, you're going to have to get it passed twice. You're going to have to be in this for a while, because that's the part where I'm not a fan.
Yeah. I think, I believe the people of North Dakota, the ones that live here, work here, have a vested interest in North Dakota, are the ones that should benefit most from whatever ends up happening with property tax. I don't think it should benefit necessarily the out of state and big corporations with shareholders. I believe we're the ones that should be bringing forth measures, which again, we talked about measure 4. I have a great deal of respect for the people who did that.
Yeah.
It takes a lot of effort, and it takes a lot of time and passion to be able to do that. So shoot, I give kudos to them all day long, because they hit it out of the park to do that.
Right.
Went out and got it done.
Yeah. It's the same thing with, for instance, you guys weren't here, but the Make Minot movement
Okay.
to change the council structure, that happened from, the people of Minot. That's what
Yeah.
they wanted. Was it what I thought was best for the city? I actually like the idea of representative government, so that we didn't have, just everybody living in one area. But that was, my thought process on it.
And you were on council. I do not remember the years you were on council, but I think it's just after that movement, right?
No, when
It was
that
right
happened.
in the
You were right in the
transition.
middle.
In fact, my term ended because of that.
Okay.
Oh, sure.
I didn't know that.
And so, and I had said, I didn't think it was the right thing, not because, making the council smaller was a bad idea. There was too many of us. And with anything, you got a group of people, you're going to have people that do more work than the others. That happens anywhere.
Right.
But my concern was the at large. And it wasn't that I didn't think that you should be able to vote for everybody. But, now you've got specifically the northeast section of town with no representation at all. Mr. Snyder would have been representation for that area.
Yeah.
But traditionally speaking, when you look at snow removal, when you look at road maintenance, you look at all of that stuff, that area keeps getting kicked down the road. The can keeps getting kicked down the road. And so lack of representation in that area is a problem. And when we had previously a ward system, you had 2 representatives from each
Right.
ward. At least you knew you had representatives that lived nearby you.
In the future, do you feel like it's going to create an avenue for money to be determining our city council?
It is already. The amount of money that came into the city council race specifically, because I pulled the finance disclosure
There was a lot
statements.
of those in there.
There was a ton. In fact, I submitted my disclosure for Ward County because they're due by the 4th. For anybody that is listening, if you are a candidate, I already requested that. So I hope you have it in, because there's a fee if you don't.
Yeah.
Got
And there
3
are
more
rules
days.
that we have to follow. But when you have the at large, you do see additional money come in, and we saw that happen in this last election. It's going to keep happening.
Right. Interesting stuff. Well,
Mhm.
there's so much we've talked about. There's so much more we could talk
We could
about.
keep going, but
We'll have to have Miranda
I should
back
go
on
back to
again.
work.
I suppose it is that time.
So- Really appreciate you coming on today.
Yeah, thank you for
It's
having
been
me.
fun.
Absolutely. This has been another edition of Minot Talk every Tuesday, 2 p.m. Make sure that you are tuned on in the future. But for now, come back this Thursday at 7 p.m. when we'll be live with Dr. Rick Becker and Robert Harms to talk about property tax in North Dakota. Keep it local group and in unfair property tax, which I think is an unfair name.
I
But
would
that's a
agree.
whole
I
nother
would agree.
discussion.
The Patriot Act. We could go down that whole rabbit
So,
hole too.
Mhm.
but thank you for watching.
Yep.